Melissa, I'm going to give you a countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good morning, Leavenworth citizens. Welcome to the Mayor's Facebook Live Town Hall number 12. Today is June 17th, 2020. In addition to myself, as I normally have the city manager, Mr. Paul Kramer, he is with us today, and he'll be talking about a few things regarding city operations later on in the town hall. I also have as our guest expert, Police Chief Pat Kitchens. Chief Kitchens is going to talk a little bit about his program coming up in terms of a community conversation on the use of force. And I think we'll do that at the beginning of this Facebook Live Town Hall. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about an update on COVID-19. And we're also going to talk a little bit about some great news the city received on Monday in terms of the Bureau of Prisons announcing a new federal penitentiary to be built in Leavenworth. And then I'll talk a little bit about economic development. It's kind of been a little below the radar recently, but just a little update in terms of the Paycheck Protection Program and a program and an event that is occurring in the next few months in downtown Leavenworth, sponsored and funded by the Leavenworth Main Street organization. So without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Chief Pat Kitchens. Chief?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for having me this morning. There's an obvious lot of attention being paid to policing in the United States. For obvious reasons. There's a lot of discussion both here in the Leavenworth community and around the country about policing and some potential for changes, the way that we approach policing and the way that we have routinely done business. And I'm all for those conversations and those discussions. So I think the senior leadership of the police department thought it was a good idea to have some public conversations about the use of force, about things like what the law is relative to that, what the department's policy is, how we came to those policies, what our training program is, how we train police officers. And so we announced that earlier this week that on Monday, July the 13th at 6 p.m. at the Riverfront Community Center, we'll have the first of those series of forums. We'd invite the public to come down. I've had a few questions about whether you need to register. You do not. There is a maximum capacity at the community center as a result of some social distancing, but we feel like there's going to be enough room to do that. We are also planning to have another one on a Saturday morning in August, August the 8th on Saturday morning at the St. Mary campus at the McGilley Fieldhouse, which will also have quite a bit of room and capacity. Again, the principle of the entire event is public education about use of force, where we are. Then we want to listen. We want to hear what the public has to say about concerns regarding police use of force. We want to hear what changes are being talked about. I think that will give everybody a fair opportunity to, at least have some sense of where we are. And then if we need to make some changes about the way that we do business, we'll do that from a position of being informed. Right now, tensions are very high, emotions are running very high. And we want to have those conversations, but we also want to make sure they're done from the right place with thought and foresight, evaluate whatever unintended consequences might come from changes. And so that's our position. And then we'll continue those conversations. If we need to have more sessions, we'll do that. We would anticipate maybe coming to the City Commission at some point after that, talk about it at a study session. I just want to make sure that we do it in the right way with a lot of thought and a lot of input from everybody, because it's all of our police department. We want to make sure that we're able to keep people safe, do the job of policing, which is going to require the use of force occasionally, but make sure that it's done the right way and as safely as we can so that nobody gets hurt. And so that's our plan going forward to deal with it. And so if there might be questions about the forums or questions specifically about what we might address, I'll be glad to answer those.
Any questions, Mr. Kramer?
Not yet.
Chief, sounds like a very, very good plan, deliberate, so I'm very supportive of it, as I believe the other commissioners are. So I appreciate your initiative as far as that goes, and I think the time's going to go very quickly between now and the 13th of July, and then the one in August. So I was wondering, from the standpoint of some of your contemporaries, colleagues in the law enforcement arena, are they planning to do similar things like Lansing or some of the cities maybe in the metro area? Are you aware of anything that they may be doing?
Nothing specific yet. I can assure you, Mr. Mayor, that every law enforcement agency in the United States is talking about, policy review and changes and talking about those kinds of things. Whether they choose to specifically do that, I haven't heard that just yet, but I'm certain everybody's talking about it.
Well, I think involving the public is a very good step in terms of transparency, and also just, I'm sure that there's some good ideas out there, and it's no better way than having some public forums to find out about that information, and just making sure that the stakeholders, as far as this particular situation, have a chance to put their voice into the conversation.
Right.
I don't think I have any other questions. Any questions from the Chief? Thanks for coming by.
Thank you, Brian. Let me make one more quick statement. We're talking about live streaming both of the programs. We'll see how the technical prospects work out for that. If not, we will certainly record it and make it available for people to watch on the Channel 2 programming sometime after that. So in the event that people are unable to attend or there's some complication, we'll make every effort to make those discussions available to the public in all of our forums as best we can, even if a person can't make it. In the event that someone knows they're not going to make it, they want to email us questions in advance of that, they're hearing about certain discussions and talking about certain issues, feel free to get that to us, and we'll try as best we can to address that individually and then also in the forums. And so I think that's it.
Yeah, I did see that some people, when you announced it and it went out on social media on Monday, there were some people that were wondering about whether it would be videotaped or preserved, and the answer is yes.
Yes, one of those 2 or 3 options, we'll do that.
Okay. Thanks a lot,
All
Chief.
right. Thank you, sir.
Have a good day. I'm going to talk a little bit about COVID-19, and as I've done in the past, I usually start with the state statistics. So this information was as of Monday, this past Monday, the 15th of June at 12:30 p.m. The number of cases statewide is 11,419, and that is an increase since 2 weeks ago when we had the last Facebook Live town hall of, believe it or not, 1,408 cases, an increase of 1,408 cases. So the total case rate for the state per 1,000 people is 3.92%. So that's an interesting statistic. I think that's remained relatively stable over the last 2 or 3 months. In terms of, I will make a comparison now with Leavenworth in terms of the number of cases. Number of cases in Leavenworth County, 1,109, and that's an increase of 14 since our last Facebook Live town hall 2 weeks ago. And the total case rate per 1,000 people in Leavenworth County is 13.6%. Now, that's obviously significantly higher than the total case rate for the state, but remember, in those numbers, in terms of positive cases, are the 836 Lansing Correctional Facility inmates who tested positive for COVID-19, 67 Grossman Center folks who tested positive for COVID-19, and then 206, quote, community, unquote, cases, which included the the prison guards from Lansing Correctional Facility. Some number of those 206 were those prison guards who contracted COVID-19. In terms of Kansas, the average age for somebody who's contracted COVID-19 is 42. Median age is 40. Youngest case, as we've said every time we've had a town hall, is a baby, not yet one. And the oldest case is a person 103 years of age. In terms of gender, number of cases for females is 5,048. That represents a little over 44%. And male is 6,200. That represents a little over 54% of the total cases. Once again, the most prevalent age group for the number of cases is ages 25 through 34. 2,000, little over 2,200 cases. That's 19.4% of the total number of cases. 35 years to 44 years old. That's 2,129 cases, representing 18.6% of the total number of cases. And then 45 to 54 years old, almost 2,000, representing 17.5% of the total cases. So those are the three top age groups that are contracting the COVID-19 virus. Statewide deaths, 245. Median age, 79. Youngest age, 29. Oldest age, 99. Death rate, in terms of the number of people who've contracted COVID-19, tested positive, is 2.2% within the state. That's the same as 2 weeks ago. That has stayed the same as what I reported 2 weeks ago. Now, looking at the age groups. Age groups 85 years of age and older. 93 people in that age group have unfortunately passed away, representing 38% of the deaths due to COVID-19. The next age group, 75 years of age, 84 years of age, 49 people unfortunately have passed away, representing 20% of the total number of deaths. 65 through 74 years old, 47 people have unfortunately passed away in that age group, and that represents 19.2% of the people who have passed away in the state due to COVID-19. The county deaths have remained the same, have not increased since 2 weeks ago. There have been 7, and 4 of those were inmates at the Lansing Correctional Facility, and 3 categorized as, quote, community, unquote, people who have passed away. And that's a death rate, very low, fortunately, and very good, of 0.63% in terms of the number of positive cases. So that's a very, very, very good statistic and a good story that percentage is so low. Kansas testing rates. The number of people that have been tested in Kansas is almost 137,000. The percent of people who have tested positive is 8.4% of that almost 137,000 people who've been tested. And the testing rate per 1,000 people in the state, that's a testing rate of 47%. 47%. Leavenworth County testing rate per 1,000 is significantly higher, and I know this is one of the greatest testing rates within the state, and I think that is a good thing. 75.4%. Leavenworth County testing rate per number of people tested per 1,000 people in the county, 75.4%. Number of patients tested, number of people tested, 6,165. And just as an example in terms of the testing rates for some of the adjacent counties, Wyandotte County is almost 69%. Johnson County, 53.6%. Douglas County, 37.6%, and Atchison County, 46.4%. So we're doing well as far as the number of tests that are being administered, particularly based on the per capita rate of per 1,000 residents, citizens within the county of Leavenworth. We do want to talk a little bit about a concern at this point, though. And like I said, we're doing well within the county and within the city. But, I mean, if anybody's been paying attention to the news, we know that the average number of daily new coronavirus cases has increased from last week to this week in 21 states across the nation, according to data compiled by the Washington Post, with South Carolina and Alabama both hitting single-day records of new confirmed cases this past Sunday. This is a report that I read, an article that I read from Forbes, dated June 15th, the author's Jemima McAvoy. And Houston, the city of Houston, Texas, has experienced a record number of hospitalizations in that great city in the state of Texas. And then I heard this morning that Arizona is another state where the case rate, the number of cases, positive cases, people testing positive, and hospitalizations is going up. And the mayor from Tucson was on, and she said that in early April, they were averaging like about 19 cases per day in terms of positive COVID-19 people testing positive. As of yesterday, that had increased to 345 cases per day, people testing in Tucson positive for COVID-19. So that's quite a dramatic jump. And there's some restaurants and bars across the nation, depending on the state, that recently were allowed to serve patrons on premises. In August, in Austin, Phoenix, St. Petersburg, Florida, had to cut back, and some of those bars and restaurants had to shut down again late last week after employees contacted COVID-19. So the virus is still here. There's no question about it. We're fortunately, because of policies that had come from the state, and also particularly our public health office in the Leavenworth County, led by Mr. Jamie Miller, and the Board of County Commissioners, we've done well, and we've been able to, over the last several weeks, open up businesses, restaurants, retail shops, and believe we've been able to expand to what, 50, no more than 50, but up to 50 people in a particular group, or are we even beyond that, Mr. Kramer?
There are no current restrictions.
Okay,
on large
there are no current restrictions, but I would just, though, encourage people, and this is encouraged in the order that came out the last week of May from the county health officer and the county commission, is to keep implementing and keep applying and adhering to these best practices, which includes washing hands as often as possible and refraining from shaking hands. I see that's starting to occur a lot more out in public. Don't think it's the greatest idea, but I'd like to go back to where we were maybe about 2 months ago on that. Social distancing is very important when we're out there in the public, the 6 feet of social distancing. Wearing masks, it's not required. It's recommended by the county public health officer and the Board of County Commissioners, and of course myself as the mayor and the city commission. But particularly in the big box stores, when customers go in there, I'm pretty sure that the employees in the big box stores, and most of our stores in Leavenworth, the employees, the owners and the employers are wearing masks, not all, but most. But I don't see, I think it would be a good idea if more people, when they're going in, particularly the big box stores, wear masks. And I've got, I want to show this slide that I showed about 2 months ago in terms of the probability of the chance of transmission going from very high at the top of the slide down to very low and then virtually none. And it's pretty self-explanatory. The more, if you have people wearing masks, particularly the asymptomatic COVID-19 carrier, and we know that people can have the virus but be asymptomatic, and then you have an uninfected person who's not wearing a mask, well, I guess in this case is wearing a mask, the chance of transmission is very, very low. And then if you have the 2 people wearing masks, the asymptomatic COVID-19 carrier and the unaffected person and you maintain social distancing of 6 feet apart, it's a very low chance of transmission. And then if you stay at home, which I still encourage people to do unless you're out there having to do essential activities, virtually none. Chance of transmission, virtually none. So, I mean, we have reopened, and I'm glad for that. I think it's important, but still think there's some steps we can take as individual citizens to be as responsible as we can to our fellow men and women who are out in the community. So that's my message with regard to COVID-19. And let me think if there's anything else. No, I don't think there's anything else on exactly the health aspect of the COVID-19. I do have a little bit as far as talking about the economic relief, just a little bit of an update. Paycheck Protection Program, I've talked about that during previous Facebook Live town halls. I talked to Will Katz, who of course is the director of the Small Business Development Center. His headquarters and office is on the campus of University of Kansas in Lawrence, and he has responsibility for several counties in the northeast portion of Kansas, including Leavenworth. I talked to him this morning, and he told me that either last week or the week before, Congress passed and the President signed an update to that CARES Act, and I believe it was the CARES Act, which was the third major coronavirus relief bill, and they did two things with that Paycheck Protection Program. They changed it from the ability to use those funds during an 8-week period. They expanded that 3 times to a 24-week period. So 8 weeks would have been up, I think, the end of this month. So then we've added, what is that? Added about 6 months, I think, to that, where those funds can be used to pay for employees that employers keep on the payroll. And that money, in terms of that loan, there's a good chance it will be forgiven as long as the employers their personnel account for 60% of those expenses. 60% of their expenses based on people who continue to work for our small business people. And that was a decrease from 75%, which was the percentage when the bill was first passed. I believe it was in late March or early April. So that percentage has gone down, which is good, which means that business people can keep a little lesser number of people on board and still be considered for forgiveness of that loan as we go forward. I did not get an update on how the application process is going. I believe it's ongoing for small businesses working with their banks to go ahead and submit the application for forgiveness. And 2 weeks from now, I'll try to get an update on how that's going. I think I talked about 2 weeks ago, or maybe even a month ago, that application seemed a bit complicated. I don't know whether the Small Business Administration has cleaned that up and made it more straightforward, but I'll check in the next 2 weeks and have an update on that 2 weeks from today. The emergency injury disaster loan, which is a loan that's been around, the type of loan that's been around from the Small Business Administration for the last 20 or 25 years, that portal went down, I guess last week at some point. Mr. Katz tells me it's back open for all businesses if they wish to. If they haven't yet applied for an EIDL loan, that portal is back up, and that's directly the businesses and the business owners going on the Small Business Administration website and using their portal to apply for that particular loan. And I would encourage businesses who haven't taken advantage of that particular loan program to go ahead and at least check it out and see if it's something that they want to do. And you don't have to, well, I'm sure people would get, or business owners would get some advice from their bankers, but it's not something that's going to go up. It's just dealing directly with the Small Business Administration, and it's the funds that they have available for these EIDL loans. So I believe it is be quicker, once you get the application, you put the information in there, and you apply for that EIDL loan. Let's talk a little bit about the unemployment rate. It fell to 13.3% in May. That was the report that came out the first week in June, which covered the unemployment rate for May for the nation, 13.3%. And that was a good drop from the previous month, which in April had been 14.7%. And that April number was pretty alarming, but was expected because of the shutdown of a significant portion of the economy due to trying to prevent the spread of COVID-19. And the number of people estimated to be unemployed in April was just close to 21 million, representing that 14.7%, which is a very, very high number. So I was happy, and I'm sure most Americans were happy when they saw that unemployment rate fall to 13.3% at the end of May. And that was reported in early June by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is part of the Department of Labor of our federal government. There hasn't been much. I did see something where the Trump administration is looking at possibly, instead of the weekly unemployment benefit, which was part of one of those relief bills. It may have been the CARES Act, but it was one of those relief bills that Congress passed and the President signed. You know, there was an additional $600 of an unemployment benefit per week that would supplement what people were getting from filing for state unemployment. Well, that program is scheduled to expire on the 31st of July. So there's some talk now as to whether that program will be extended for some period of time, or the Trump administration is talking about replacing that program, that $600 unemployment weekly benefit, with a sort of a cash bonus to encourage and incentivize people to go back to work. That's about all I know, but if you're interested, I'm sure you could Google that, and I think there'll be more discussions about that as we get further into June, and then after the 4th of July, as we get into the middle of the July, because that unemployment benefit of that $600 per week that I just talked about does run out for Americans on the 31st of July as the law is currently written. Okay, I think that's all I have as far as an update on kind of what's happening economically, resulting or as a consequence, and what the various governments have done. I know that the state is, there's a committee that the governors and the legislature put together to look at. I think the money's going to come out to the cities and counties. It has to be distributed. I think there's a plan to do it in 2 increments, and I haven't been following their, how that, what amount of money is going to come out during those 2 increments, and how much the City of Leavenworth is going to get, and how much the county is going to get. But when they do come up with some decisions, and I'll probably be able to cover that next week. They set up that committee as a result of that final session that the state legislature was in the first week of June, when they went back into session for a couple of days. So that they still have to determine that. That's pretty critical for states, for cities and counties, local governments, to compensate for the reduction that can be expected in terms of sales taxes because of what we've done with the economy. I'm not sure property taxes probably would not be affected all that much, but franchise fees from the major, like telecommunication organizations, energy corporations, the city gets franchise fees based on the business that they do within the city. That's been lower over the last 2 or 3 months. So that the decisions by that committee and the blessing from the governor and it will be pretty important to the city of Leavenworth and all county and city governments within the state of Kansas. So I'll keep tracking that and try to have an update on that in 2 weeks. I think I'm going to turn it over to the city manager right now, Mr. Paul Kramer, to talk a little bit about things that are related directly to the city, beginning with this, the announcement of the Bureau of Prisons in terms of the new federal penitentiary in Leavenworth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good morning, Leavenworth. Monday afternoon, in a conference call with Senator Moran and staff at the Bureau of Prisons, sort of made official that the city of Leavenworth would be the recipient of about $364 million new build, a new federal prison to be located on existing Bureau of Prison property north of Metropolitan Avenue. They noted in the call, the staff from the BOP, that the first appropriation to start looking at a new prison for this site was in 2001. So you can see 19 years later, here we are with the full funding being allocated for that new facility. I think the mayor mentioned last night and mentioned on the call at our commission meeting last night and then on our call with Senator Moran and the BOP staff, and I will continue to also mention that this is work of previous city commissioners, mayors, city staff, elected officials, BOP members, so truly a long-term project. I know that there's a lot of information floating around already about what this project means and what it is. We're going to work on a fact sheet to put out on the city's website and Facebook so that just the correct information is out there. I know there's a lot of speculation. I'll go over briefly what it is and what it is not. So first of all, I want to talk about the new facility. The new facility, again, is about $365 million project. That is the largest federal project in the state of Kansas since the MBAF facility in Manhattan about a decade ago. So it's a substantial project for the entire state, also the region. Second of all, it is a medium security prison. It is with a satellite prison camp. It is a replacement for the existing facility. It's not an addition to, it's not an addition on the existing facility. It's its own new standalone facility, and it will replace the current facility as a prison. Second of all, it is not a medical facility. Early on in the process, I think there was something attached to it related to some aged prisoners throughout the system coming here for some specialty care. That is not the case. Of course, things could change in the next 4 years, but we have no expectation that that is the case and that it will just be a standard medium security federal prison. A timeline of when it's going to happen. Right now, there was an environmental impact statement done in 2014 and 15, and that is still good, but it needs to be updated. So over the next 12 months, a firm, a contractor, will do a supplement to the environmental impact statement. That's basically how does this project impact the environment. Everything from watershed to animal life will be looked at and finalized. Concurrently, two other things will happen. The Bureau of Prisons will finalize the technical specifications for the next generation of medium security prisons. This will be state of the art. They are literally writing the regulations on how this prison will be built and operated right now. And the third thing that will go on over those 12 months is they will begin to put together the bid package for a design build project. So if that goes well, this time next year, the project would be out to bid and you could start seeing the first signs of construction. Once the construction starts, the anticipated construction time frame right now is 2.5 years. And then at the end of that, there's a 6-month time frame or an expectation to do what's called punch listing, which is where you go through the grounds, through the building, through everything to ensure that it is exactly as designed and it functions as is required by the Bureau of Prisons. So optimistically, that new facility would be open in the summer to the fall of 2024. These things are always subject to conditions beyond people's control, materials, the economy, whatever it may be. So look for that maybe in mid to late 2024 right now. So the old facility. The old facility is absolutely cherished by the Bureau of Prisons. I think that we should start there, that this was not a desire for the Bureau to abandon the old facility. It's simply a matter of efficiency. It's not efficient in an energy perspective, in a corrections perspective, for a safety perspective. But it is a valued historic landmark in the country, and certainly the flagship of the Bureau of Prisons. So there are plans to try to reuse all or a portion of that prison. It's very preliminary right now. There's been talks about a National Corrections Training Center. There's been talks about the potential use of the metropolitan-facing area, our building, as a museum. Again, very early on right now, but we will, as the city, we will continue to push our federal agencies and our federal elected officials to make that happen, so we don't lose that cornerstone of our community, the big top there on Metropolitan. So I think that hits the highlights of it. We'll summarize that and put that on the website so that everybody can be a part of this project. This is something that the community should be a part of, should feel a part of. We'll share everything we can share, try to be as transparent as possible, and certainly be available to answer questions as we move through the project. So, did I miss anything on the prison?
No, the only thing, it was a good rundown. Did you mention that the camp is gonna be part of that too, right? Did you mention the camp?
Yes, there'll be the new medical facility, or the new medium security facility with a satellite prison camp included.
Okay, I missed that.
That's okay.
So the only thing I would add to what the city manager has outlined is that we did have a teleconference with Senator Moran and the Bureau of Prisons on Monday afternoon. It went well. That's when we first found out of the decision, the final decision, that this was going to occur in the city of Leavenworth. And so I had a chance maybe to talk for about a minute, and I made 2 points, which I'll try to review very quickly what I said to the people on the teleconference, including Senator Moran and the officials from the Bureau of Prisons. I just said that Monday, that day, was really an exciting and important day in the history of First City of Kansas. And that announcement of a plan to construct a new prison to replace the current United States Penitentiary in Leavenworth represents a continuation of the city's century-long relationship with our great federal partner, the Bureau of Prisons. And the city values this relationship and wishes to thank the Bureau of Prisons leadership, BOP leadership, for their expertise and professionalism in the years leading up to this moment. And those years, I mean, it really amounted to a decade. City Manager Kramer talked about his predecessor had a very important role to play in this. Previous city commissions did, so I salute them for their perseverance, for their understanding the importance of continuing to advocate for the Bureau of Prisons to make this decision. But we're absolutely very, very excited that this project is going to take place and should be completed, like the city manager said, sometime either late spring or early summer of 2024. And then I thanked Senator Moran. He's really, in terms of, has been the champion in Congress, in the United States Congress, for the new prison, and we thanked him. I thanked him for his due diligence, perseverance, and ability to keep all parties informed and moving forward. And I said that the city elected and appointed officials and the citizens we serve appreciated his work, which will definitely benefit the city, the county, the state, and the nations in the decades ahead. So I just wanted to review briefly what I was able to convey to Senator Moran and the Bureau of Prisons senior officials on Monday afternoon when we had that teleconference. I'm going to turn it back over to the city manager to talk about a few other things regarding the city.
Yeah, just a couple other updates. I know people have started to get back to our parks and our parks facilities. As you all know, the Riverfront Community Center is back open on a limited basis. We have opened the indoor aquatic center. We are able to control that facility quite well as far as lap swims, individual swimmers in lap swims, small classes for aquasize. I was happy that we were able to find a way to do swim lessons for children. I know there's some disappointment still about the Woolman Aquatic Center, but I think we've seen as the COVID cases have now continued to increase that was probably the wise decision. But at the Riverfront Community Center, swim lessons registrations have been going well. We have a couple sessions already sold out. So I would ask that people, if you're interested in having your child participate in those, go quickly and register on the city's website. We have about 25 registered now, and we have a couple more spots before those sessions open. A couple other exciting parks and recreation news, amenities for our residents. Stubby Park is coming along very well. Today or tomorrow, if you go out there, you'll see them pouring the new parking lot. One of the things we did, along with the two new play structures, as a reminder, there's two play structures, one for ages 2 to 5, and then a separate one, which is on the north side, for ages 5 to 12, that is a really challenging park features for kids up to 12 years old. We also have a lot of individual play elements around, a trail around. There will be a fence installed, as we mentioned when we introduced this project, to give parents a little bit of peace of mind with 4th Street right there. So the parking lot, that had a very limited parking lot, and we certainly want more residents to come to enjoy the new park amenities. So there is an expanded parking lot. I think we mentioned it once before, but continue to mention that Geiger Ready Mix donated all the concrete for the entire park project, which was quite the gesture on their part. Great community partner. But they'll be pouring the parking lot today, and tomorrow that obviously has to cure, striped, and we got some fence work to do. So we're moving along. Hope to have that this summer where our residents can get out and enjoy that beautiful new park. The campground is now also fully open for those looking to use it that don't have contained plumbing facilities like in a camper or some sort of RV. We do still limit the spots. We are keeping every other spot open just because of distancing. We'll continue to make those decisions on about every 2 weeks. We'll examine those to see what is the best way to do that. But right now we've been able to accommodate most all requests with the limited campsites we've had. But again, if you do just have a tent or anything like that, you can reserve camp spots now. I was told this morning that since Monday, we've had 8 reservations for shelters around the city. So as a reminder, shelter reservations are back open. Our picnic tables are back out in our parks for those family type events, birthday parties that we have a lot in our parks over the summer. So that was good news. Just a really quick preview of some exciting stuff that's also happening in the city. Next week, the City Commission will see their second action related to the renovation, the complete and total renovation of Price Chopper. That project is moving forward. There are numerous steps involved in the city's participation on keeping that regional brand in our northernmost grocery store in the community. So that's on the agenda next week. The Payless Shoe Store has been taken all the way down to the ground, and as we've announced in a few different settings before, but I'm not sure in the town hall, that will be a standalone Starbucks. There are no plans to remove the Starbucks from the new Price Chopper at this point. They're separate, not viewed as competitors, so there'll be both of those options. So we continue to work on the 4th Street corridor as we do in other areas of the city. So those are the updates that I had. Mr. Mayor, if there's any other things that you've heard from the community or that you'd like me to touch on, I'd be happy to do so.
Just very quickly, how's the Thornton Street project going? Just a very brief update as far as that goes.
Yeah, and I'll address one thing on the Thornton Street project. The Thornton Street project is going as well as we could have imagined. It is on target and on time and on schedule. They're now on the west side of the project, west of this Maple and Thornton intersection, working on that project. If anybody's concerned about the water pooling on the east part of the project, that will all be rectified when we put the final layer of asphalt on. And the reason there's so much water in there right now is because that entire area was sodded, and they water it as part of the requirement the contractor has to. So there's a lot of water right now in that area. And the final asphalt lay will guide all that water directly into the stormwater. So the water does pool right now, but there's more asphalt to go on the finishing layer once the entire project's done. But the project is moving along well right now.
Good, thank you. I'm gonna circle back a little bit, because I wanted to mention something related to our economy, and specifically our economy, our downtown economy, our 28 block beautiful downtown. I think last week is when the Leavenworth Main Street organization here in Leavenworth received a Union Pacific grant from the Union Pacific Railroad for $3,000, and they're gonna put that money to work in a program called Get Back on Track program, which is going to occur over the next 2-3 months downtown as an incentive for people, our citizens, customers to come down and frequent and buy merchandise and items from our businesses in downtown Leavenworth. And that money is going to be used as really the foundation for implementing this program. And there's going to be like 3 iterations. I think by the end of June is one iteration, then maybe a month later another iteration, and then a 3rd iteration. And what people have to do, or shoppers have to do, if you go down and spend money in one of the stores, one of the restaurants downtown, $100 or greater, save your receipts, bring them to the Leavenworth Main Street office, and those receipts are going to be entered into a kind of a lottery in terms of a drawing that will occur. And so the drawings, somebody will win, and then there'll be gift certificates, merchandise from various downtown merchants. And so that's the first iteration. The second iteration probably occur about a month later. 150, that'll be another 100. If you spend $150 worth and you bring your on merchandise and bring your receipts to the Leavenworth Main Street office, then your receipts would be put into that pot, and somebody again will become a winner of that second iteration, and that'll happen a 3rd time. And I think the amount there is spending $200 and then bringing the receipts to the Leavenworth Main Street office. I hope I have that right. I think it's distinct $100, $150, and then $200. I don't think it's cumulative, but I could be a little bit wrong there. But it's sounds like a good program, a good incentive program, and our merchants are downtown, open for business, and I would encourage people to support this program. And it sounds like fun, and it'll be a way to meet other people, see how our merchants are doing after some of them being closed or having modified, restricted hours over the last 3 months or so. So just wanted to mention that, and I think that's money that we received as a grant, Leavenworth Main Street. And you can go to their website too. I'm sure they're talking about that particular program, Get Back on Track program, on their website. The other thing I wanted to quickly talk about, and we had an update from Ms. Mary Dwyer, our Community Development Coordinator in the city last night at our study session. The city received from the CARES Act $201,000 to combat the effects of COVID-19. The city determined that it would allocate the funds in 2 areas: public service agency support, approximately $101,000 for COVID relief in that category to public service agencies, and special economic development, $100,000 for a small business COVID relief program. We have gathered and organized all the necessary federal paperwork, has been completed, and our city was the first in the region to receive its grant agreement for the $101,000 that is going to the public service agencies. And so we've released the public service request for funds, and applications are due this Friday by 3 p.m. That's the 19th of June. Notices were placed in the Leavenworth Times, released through the Leavenworth County Humane Service Council, and sent directly to the Community Development Block Grant funding related agencies. The small business program for in COVID relief, that 100,000, that second half of the money is on hold pending federal guidelines. We are Housing and Urban Development, the federal agency, cabinet office that is responsible for promulgating that information, has still not provided the guidelines and clarifications that are needed. But they're saying that they are working on those guidelines and that they will be printed in the Federal Register as soon as they are finished. We don't really have a good timeline as to whether that's 2 weeks or 4 weeks, but I don't know, if another 2 weeks goes past, we may weigh in with our federal elected officials, the 2 senators, and then the congressman from the U.S. Congressional District here in Kansas, Congressman Watkins, to find out what they can find out, because this program's been available since I think CARES Act 3, which, as I said, was passed in late March or at the latest early April. So that's a little update on that particular program. Do we have any questions?
We did have 2 questions I'll address real quick. Is our Haymarket concerts going on this summer? We have released any restrictions on renting Haymarket Square. We're approving concerts and events like the Leavenworth Cruisers one at a time, so they are allowed, and so we're doing one. Sometimes we approve the whole summer, but we want to see if anything happens. But the answer is yes, so watch for Main Street's announcement on their concert series and the Leavenworth Cruisers and what other events may happen at Haymarket Square. Then we had a question on Camp Leavenworth. Right now, the plan is to have a presentation and some information on Camp Leavenworth at the July 7th study session. I hate to tease something that's still a couple weeks out, but that night is when we'll get a little more information on Camp Leavenworth.
Okay. So that brings us to the close of today's Facebook Live Town Hall. I'll just try to swing back to COVID-19, and that is still just a number one priority. We've got about 2 or 3 major priorities that still dealing with that health crisis as a city is in that top 3, and we'll continue to do our due diligence as a city commission, the city manager, and the city staff to do our very best to continue to ensure the health, safety, and welfare of all Leavenworth citizens. And part of that, a big part of that, is getting out accurate and relevant information with regard to the healthcare aspects. I talked a little bit about that today in terms of the statistics and how the city and the county are doing, the adjustment of the delivery of city services to account for the social distancing requirements. And, you know, we saw the contraction of those city services at the beginning of this crisis, and then the slow reopening of these city services. And 2 weeks ago, we talked about some of the city services that have opened, and the city manager continued that today. So we're back more where we were before the COVID-19 crisis hit the nation, hit the state, hit the county and the city in mid-March. So that's a good thing. We just need to keep our eye on the ball and do those best practices as much as we possibly can, so we can stay where we are now as a city and a county and a state, quite frankly, as far as the statistics, and relatively compared to other states, low number of cases, and we just don't want to go backwards if those cases per day were to start rising, and they haven't been in the state or the county or the city, but we just gotta stay on top of it. So that is about it. The next Facebook Live Town Hall will be 2 weeks from today at the same time at 11 a.m. And I appreciate the chief coming today, Chief Kitchens, and talking about those 2 community sessions to talk about police policies and police practices with respect to the use of force. I'm looking forward to those sessions. I know myself and my fellow commissioners will be there. I hope that the public turns out for those discussions. It's very, very important. There are still protests going on within the United States and our state, peaceful protest, and peaceful protests are fine and good. And so it is something that is going to be with us, and we need to deal with it as a nation, a state, a county, and a city. And those 2 community sessions and the work that will go into that, and the commission keeping an open mind and wanting to hear from the public will be a big part of that. So have a good rest of your week, and it's been pretty hot lately, so be careful out there if you're walking. There are still a lot more people walking in the city I've seen over the last 3 months, so just hydrate and just be careful of that, getting a sunburn and wearing your sunblock and those type of things. But have a good week. I think it's supposed to get a little cooler towards the end of the week and maybe have some rain, but thank you very much, and we'll see you and talk to you in 2 weeks.